Well, Jay, this is another special episode of the podcast. Now, in this one, we speak with actually a former colleague of ours, Rio Caraeff, over at Musixmatch. Musixmatch is revolutionizing how artists, rights holders, and fans connect by working with music publishers and DSPs to provide rights, data, and services to enhance the experience of music and generate royalties for music rights owners.
That's right. Rio and I dive deep into the business of lyrics and how songwriters can turn their lyrics into strategic assets in this streaming-obsessed world, including, lyrics as critical metadata that enable discovery, recommendations, moderation, and of course, monetization. So now, without further ado, here's Rio Caraeff from Musixmatch. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air, on the air, on the air, on the air, on the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now, from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Rio, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, Jay. Thanks again for having me as well.
Yeah. For those with no prior knowledge, what is Musixmatch?
So Musixmatch is essentially the world's largest lyrics and music data set company, right? Founded about 15 years ago in Bologna, Italy, really designed to figure out how to essentially turn lyrics, into a critical part of the music experience while remunerating songwriters and rights owners appropriately. And remember, of course, that lyrics were never kind of a key revenue stream, for rights owners until relatively recently, until after, Musixmatch helped build that market. But today, fast forward to today we power lyric experiences for Spotify, for Apple Music, for YouTube, Google, Amazon, Snap, Tidal.
Anyone we've heard of?
Yeah, iHeart, many others.
Right.
And it's everything from the rights, to the lyrics. We have 225,000 rights agreements. To the actual lyric content itself. Then there's the alignment and synchronization with the sound recording, which gives you the fun word by word, playback experience. Then you get into translations and having them available, in many countries, and remembering that most people around the world learn English, through the power of music and through lyrics, for the first time. And then you get into what I call like the iceberg under the ocean, right? The thing that's not as visible or well understood, because lyrics can seem maybe deceptively simple, is all of the, what we call the administration, right? The matching to the songwriters and the rights owners with all the streaming activity, the payments, the royalty reporting, the statements. So we essentially act as like a CMO, for lyrics on a worldwide basis. And so there's the administration, the rights, the lyric content, and all of that we provide for our customers, essentially every music streaming service, every DSP and, social network and search engine.
Yeah, that's massive. How do you keep it accurate? Because you're only as good as the data that you get. And you and I both know that sometimes artists will deliver lyrics, but then when they recorded it in the studio, maybe they ad-libbed or they didn't match it quite up. How is that process for keeping all of those lyrics accurate?
Yeah, it's a great question. You can't, we used to get lyrics from, different, from labels or publishers or management, and they would say things like, repeat chorus 3 times, like inside of it. And you're just like, that makes sense if you're maybe in the studio, right? But that doesn't make sense on Spotify, right? You can't put that in front of, of a Taylor Swift fan, there. No. And so essentially the secret sauce for Musixmatch is essentially a combination of essentially humans with technology, right? So amplifying, human potential. We have millions of people around the world in essentially a wiki style community who are very passionate about everything from, German speed metal to, Indian, Hindi, music to, all kinds of pop and rock and hip hop from all around the world. And so we have essentially a graduated academy, of different contributors and editors and crowdsourcing, and then combined with the latest AI, essentially to scale that up.
Yeah.
And then we even have internal studios where we do like highly sensitive pre-release, type of projects where you can't just put it out, in front of everybody, if it's a sensitive project. Right. So a combination of humans, technology, in-house, crowdsourced community. That's how we constantly keep lyrics updated and at par.
Yeah, there's so much more to it, Rio. I mean, I was thinking about something that didn't really cross my mind until I was reading about Musixmatch, and that is the different languages, just translating. I'm totally focused on English, but you support, a lot of different translations for a lot of different countries. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the truth is, translations have been something that we've been doing for quite a while and making available to our customers, but it's only recently starting to come out into the market. Apple announced translations in June and shipped them, just a week or two ago. But basically, you can see lyrics and experience them in the native language with which the artist has intended and the songwriter intended, but then also be able to see them in your language, in Italian or in German or French or, Korean or Japanese. And then you can basically toggle, between, those different things. We support, up to 250 different languages, that we're supporting. And then you get into even deeper level, like you can start to see, like, let's say there's a K-pop song with 5 different writers and singers. You can see who is singing which verse, right? So we call that artist tagging, or there's a duet, Bruno Mars sings this part, Rosé sings that part. And so putting all that metadata into the underlying, data set. So that way, when you're experiencing it on Instagram, in a story, you're experiencing it on Spotify, you get that rich experience. So a lot of what we do is give our customers all these tools, and then it's up to Spotify or Apple in terms of how they implement it, in terms of the service. But translations, transcriptions, synchronization, alignment, performance tagging, lyric videos, all of these things are tools and services we provide.
Yeah. Musixmatch has grown from lyrics to a broader sort of music data platform. Talk about your core mission today and how that may have evolved over the last 5 years.
Yeah. So the fastest growing part of our business, we put under the umbrella we call Musixmatch Pro. And Pro is essentially a concept, right? The concept is empower artists and songwriters with tools to have what I call agency over your lyrics or over your business of music. And so some artists, want to, have tools to do the transcription, to do the translation, to do the alignment, to make the videos, to get, upload the data, to get paid, all of that. And then others may say, hey, that's a lot of work. I don't have time for that. Do it for me. right? And you could push the easy button and essentially outsource it to us, which we do no problem there. So now we have millions of artists using Pro to basically manage their lyrics on a daily, monthly, annual basis. And then now we're moving Pro into what I would call maybe the enterprise, kind of segment. So how does Pro work with Universal, Music Group? How does Pro work with, Fuga or DistroKid, right? And the needs are different, when you're a distributor, when you're a label, when you're managing, dozens or hundreds, of different artists.
Yeah.
And so you need different tools, you need, programmatic API access, you need bulk upload and DDEX, delivery, you need, you maybe need to not view things on an artist by artist level, but on a, repertoire owner, level. So we're moving Pro into those avenues as well. And basically, so we make Pro available three different ways. There's what we call retail, like where anybody can come and use it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to know that distribution of lyrics is always free, right? So we don't charge for distribution of lyrics to Spotify or anywhere else. So core distribution is always free, but there are premium services you can pay for if you want. But I would call them the option, not the obligation. And then there's what we call like wholesale, right, where we bundle Pro into DistroKid, for example, where it's heavily integrated into the experience and people can use it or not use it if they want. And that's usually on a co-branded, basis. And then you have, maybe focusing on bigger businesses, right? How do you integrate it into Warner Chappell or integrate it into Sony Music? And then you get into all kinds of other services that those bigger companies need, which may be, different than what a independent artist needs.
Yeah, well, that leads beautifully into the next question. We talk about remuneration because I remember a time when lyrics were basically you bought the sheet music, and then as the internet sort of took off, it was a wild, wild west without any permission or anything. People were just posting lyrics on all these.
We all remember those lyric websites.
Yeah, and sometimes they would have chords or tablature or whatever, and it feels like now it's sort of being roped in where it's accurate, it's official. Talk a little bit about how people make money from this. Is it mainly the publishers? How is that working out?
Yeah, I was proud this year. I was at the NMPA annual meeting in June with David Israelite, who I know is a guest on your show earlier. And for the very first time, lyrics were on his presentation as a revenue stream for songwriters and music publishers. And I was, proud to see them at 1%, right, of the total publishing, economic opportunity, up there with sheet music, also 1%. Right. So, but in prior years, we weren't even on the board, not even on his presentation, there. So we're proud to be the smallest part, of the publishing pie. But it's, basically, and just in the last year or two alone, we flow about $300 million a year, of royalties, through the company and that we pay out, to rights owners. It's predominantly music publishers, right, in terms of how we manage that. And essentially, it's all really based upon essentially the lyric view, right, or the lyric impression, right, that occurs. The business models vary, but essentially when a lyric impression occurs, there's revenue that's generated and revenue that's shared, directly with the rights owner and with the songwriters. And so, and that occurs whether it's on, a social media platform or whether it's on a streaming platform or a video service. Lyrics are a core part, of how you experience music. I would even say, like when I'm on Instagram stories and I have my volume, turned down, lyrics they punch way above their weight in terms of how I experience music.
Sure.
Because it may be the only way, that I see there's music, on a post or the first way, that I see it there. So lyrics have incredible value as a part of the music experience, especially when you're, whether you're in the back of a Waymo or whether you're in the, whether you're experiencing, Spotify or Apple on your TV or, in your social feed.
Yeah, I've known ever since I was very young how powerful lyrics are to pulling you into the narrative and pulling you into the album. Every once in a while, you would get, Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and there'd be lyrics, and it just draws you deeper into the music much more quickly. I wanted to ask you about sort of the movement to standardize just music metadata in general. It's so important for our industry, and it's so messed up on so many different levels. There's bad metadata, on Sound Exchange or on the DSPs. We're constantly cleaning those things up, and it's no one's fault in particular. This business evolved into this pretty quickly. Talk about Musixmatch's, the role in sort of standardizing music metadata and rights management in general.
Yeah, it's what I call the atomic kernel of truth, right? It's the original sin, depending on how you paint it as, engineering terms, you'd call it garbage in, garbage out, but ultimately, if that data, and that's everything from, who wrote what, and what the splits are, and, and how it's dealt with in various, countries around the world. That is such a critical part, of all of it. So we can't stress enough like how important it is, for people to make sure their data they're on top of it, from that Genesis, moment right at the very beginning of creation.
Yeah.
We ultimately, are not a part of all of that, right? But we try to where we do have I'd say the strongest, data set is around essentially who wrote what, right? And who owns what when it comes to the lyrics and the underlying compositions of the song. So that's the matching in the Musixmatch name. That's why these big customers like Spotify and Apple and others work with us, because we're good at that. I love your dog.
Yeah, thank you.
Mine's under my desk.
This is Rhodey. He wants to be on camera.
Rhodey.
Yeah.
My Hank is sleeping.
All right.
But basically, it's the match, the underlying matching all of the streaming activity against, the ownership data for the underlying publishing and compositions. And that's a big part, of how you turn lyrics, from an ancillary part of the experience to a revenue driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
You may remember, I don't know if you remember from when we worked together, my father was a rock and roll photographer for a long time. And he has many story, and he might have even, I think he did almost every Elton album, including Yellow Brick Road there. But ultimately he would, you'd have to go get the lyrics, right, to typeset them in the gatefold LP. And because you'd sit there and put the record on and want to look at the pictures and read the lyrics, right, as you're listening to the music. And so he has all these stories about trying to get the lyrics, right? And, the band never wrote them down, or they, make them up, as they, after they write the music, and record company didn't have the lyrics, and you have to meet Steely Dan at the restaurant and, have them write it down on a napkin. Right. And so in order to meet the printing deadline. And so lyrics have always been, such a core part of how we experience visual music and how we understand and relate to it, but also, such just such an afterthought, sometimes. And I remember even when I joined Universal, talking to the publishing company about, what does the business of lyrics look like? And this was, 2004. And they basically said, there is no business of lyrics. There is no business of lyrics. Let's move on, in the conversation. And so I'm proud. Obviously, I wasn't at Musixmatch then, but I'm proud of the pioneers who could see through the needle and say, hey, this is valuable. It's not fair or equitable that everybody loves lyrics, but nobody's making any money, from lyrics. And so it, took a long time, as things tend to do sometimes, but now you can see that it's a business. and a growing business, and it seems obvious, that it's a part of the publishing copyright, and it seems obvious that songwriters should get paid if they're
Sure.
valuable part of the experience on the streaming service. And it seems obvious all now, but that wasn't the case, not too long ago.
No, and you talked about sort of matching up, who is the writer of the music, who is the writer of the lyrics. And I know it's been a big problem in the industry, and I'd love to get your take on this because up until just recently, not to get too far into the weeds, but when we would deliver music to the DSPs, we'd typically have the ISRC code, which is a unique identifier on the master side, but not always the ISWC. And one of the reasons, and that's on the publishing side, the unique identifier, one of the reasons is, at least in the past, they didn't have those publishing splits back then, or maybe they didn't have those lyrics available. Do you feel like things are getting better, number one? And number two, people can deliver lyrics and things to you early prior to street, and you can just sort of hit a go live, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. We're finding that, the data is getting better, right? And it's getting better, I'd say, predominantly for two reasons. The first is that it all ultimately comes back to money, right? If there's not enough money, is it worth doing the work, right? Is it, if I'm going to get $3, is it worth it to, do some specific IT, project? And so as the business becomes visible, and you start to pay attention to it, and you start to say, what do I need to do, to make sure that I get my part of it? So we're seeing now publishers, say, what do I need to do, to prove the efficacy of my matching and make sure my catalog is optimally transcribed and that the data is delivered promptly and not in arrears, and how do we stack rank the compositions by priority so that the opportunity is realized? So these are conversations we have with publishers every day. The second reason is ultimately technology, right? So we're starting to see, improvements in getting data faster, through all of the automations and things that are underway. But oftentimes, there's a lag in the data, right, as well. And so we frequently do what we call rerunning, right? Where we rerun everything again and again because we're constantly getting new data in. And so we may have something that we don't know, the data is imperfect. And then a month later, we get the data in and then we rerun it. And then, so we're constantly paying out essentially as new data comes in, and we do rerunning and backward payments and all of that.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about AI. It's sort of the buzzword these days, but it's something we've used in our business for a long time. Talk about how your company uses AI.
Yeah, it's really I'd say everywhere, right? Essentially, everything we do is now is AI. So it's everything from how we scale transcriptions and how we generate lyrics to how we do sub-millisecond, alignment, to make sure that it used to be done, humans would sit there and say and synchronize the lyrics with the sound recording. And now it's, all done with AI to make sure that the precision is there. It's how we do translations. It's how we, make lyric videos, right? So, you could even highlight a verse and generate the sentiment of the verse and then pass that as a prompt, to a generative service, and then get 5 different visual scenes to put in your video from what your lyric means, right? So it's how we even use AI to do predictive matching when we do our administration. So we say the data is missing, but our AI says there's a 83% chance the co-writer, is this person, or the owner is probably this person. And then we go back and verify, all that. And then, but AI helps us basically, scale the matching, when there's missing data, and then we go chase down the confirmation of it.
Yeah.
But we're even doing, we have a new service we're rolling out in October, we call Music Lens, which essentially is a powerful set of tools to interrogate the global history of music through AI. So everything from what can I learn about our culture to our politics to the environment to consumerism. Why are songs about love in a perpetual decline since 1955, or what are the top 3 automotive brands, right, that are mentioned in songs in the last month. And so you get into all kinds of sentiment analysis there. You could even then take that tool and say, hey, I'm the sync licensing department at Warner Chappell, and I've got 3 million songs, and I may not have all 3 million in my head, but let me feed the Nike proposal into it and generate, here are 5 songs that are well suited, for this RFP. So there's really an infinite amount of possibilities when you have essentially the data set that we do, and and I think most importantly, the trust from the industry. We are not, I've had publishers call us the barbarian in the gate, not the barbarian at the gate, right?
Yeah.
Where we are not going to burn down the village, right? We're trusted, to be there, mingling with the rights owners. We have 15 years of history of 0 legal claims, from any rights owner, always paying on time, always administering properly.
Yeah.
And so we are not out there begging for forgiveness, right? We are in there building solutions with rights owners, for rights owners, and have a long track record of execution.
Yeah, that should be your tagline. That'd look good on a T-shirt.
Barbarian in the gate.
Yeah, at the gate. I just read this book by Chris Dalla-Riva that's coming out pretty soon called Uncharted Territory, and he did sort of what you're describing on the music side, taking like 1,200 number 1 hits from like the 50s all the way until now, and sort of looking at, how A&R and how female groups and people of color and protest songs and all of that. I think on a lyrical side, that would be absolutely amazing. You just touched on lyric videos, and I think they're so important today. It's nice to have a concept video, but they're expensive. Most of the distributors are creating what they call pseudo videos, which is just the artwork and the audio bed. But I don't know if any video engages me more than a lyric video. Talk about how you're involved with lyric videos.
Yeah, I was proud to see, even this weekend when the Taylor Swift, project came out today, and there's this movie, experience that's launching, and I was reading about, what is it a movie, or what's in the movie experience, and it basically said there's a lyric video for every song, and that'll be a big part of what you see on the movie screen for you to sing and dance, along to, and it was great to see lyric videos be, a part of that. Or at least, or the majority, of what that is, and on the big screen. But yeah, basically what we do is we have a tool that's a part of Pro that allows any artist or label to make high quality custom lyric videos. You can, if you're Interscope Records, you can put your own proprietary fonts or videos or images in there, so your video doesn't look like anybody else's video, and it looks like you hired a motion graphics person to do it. You can use generative AI, but it's an option, not an obligation. Some people want to do that and some people don't, but that's okay. It's just a creative tool that's there. You could even plug in different back ends if you want. So if your label only works with Adobe and not with somebody else, you can use the one that you're approved to use internally, and then you can also say, hey, make it for me, right? So I don't want to do that, make it for me. So we always have a curation or outsourcing part of it. And then the other part we do, which is again not often well understood or visible, is we offer essentially lyric video rights administration. So we basically say to labels, hey, you can make all these videos, and don't have to worry about getting a blanket publishing, deal or dealing with one-off clearances. Just make them, own them, put them through your supply chain on YouTube. And essentially we have negotiated a pool, with the publishers, and we'll essentially pay all the publishers for what gets generated from lyric videos. And so we're trying to essentially be the B2B partner, for independent artists, for labels, for distributors, to grow lyric videos, because we think that they are, if you, it doesn't, most people may not know, lyric videos drive, tremendously more views, than the official videos, either individually or in aggregate. And as the person who founded and ran Vivo and YouTube for a long time, I have a pretty intimate understanding of the power of lyric videos as it relates to user-generated content. And so we see that as we think the labels should be making more lyric videos. Where the tool helps address some of that, the pool helps address some of that. So we're very bullish on lyric videos as a part of it. Even in Asia, we're trying to bring over to the Western world what we call like color lyric videos, where basically, again, it's like the performer tags I mentioned, where if one artist is singing, another artist is singing, you see the lyrics in different colors. You see them, you can kind of have a visual, flavor and language that goes with the who's singing what, at what part of the song. So there's a lot of room to grow and expand the creativity of lyric videos. They don't have to be, basic. They can be as creative as they want to be.
Yeah.
It's a new canvas, a new palette.
Yeah, and it's super important. As we sort of wrap up, you're offering our listeners a discount code, which we'll put in the show notes. But Rio, where can people learn more about you and Musixmatch and what you're building?
Yeah, I think, Musixmatch.com is really the place where we have everything, right? We have the solutions for artists and labels and distributors, with solutions for DSPs. But we also have, mobile apps and all of the lyric experiences on our website. And so if you want to just get lyrics, you can always, just go to us. But predominantly, we are a B2B, company. We're not ad supported. There's no advertising. There's no sponsorship. It's really a pure and pristine, experience. So I wanted to thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's great to see you again.
It was great to see you. I loved bumping into you in Atlanta at Music Biz, and Mike and I are cheering from the sidelines. So continued success. Keep up the great work, Rio. Appreciate you.
And let me know how I can be helpful in any way.
Right on.
Take care.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.